All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for making time and joining us today for our webinar on anyLogistix, leading your organization into the future using supply or capacity planning. My name is Steve Blatney, and I'm the Director of Simulation and Artificial Intelligence at Simwell. Simwell is the premier and exclusive partner for anyLogistix in all of North America. Thank you again to everyone for being here, and thank you to the AnyLogic company for the opportunity to present today. Our organization, Simwell, has been very fortunate over the past several years to work with some of the premier supply chain leaders on the planet. And let me tell you, when you're in a room with these folks, you certainly pay attention. In working with these folks, we have learned a lot and paid attention to what they've said, and we've been able to pull from that a couple of key themes for what these folks are doing and how they're leading their organizations to be successful in their supply chain and capacity planning. Our goal of the webinar today is to share with all of you some of what we've learned in working with these thought leaders. So just to give everybody an idea of the agenda and some of the topics that we're going to cover today, we do have quite a bit of information to cover. We're going to get things started going through a couple of slides talking about a little bit about our two companies, Simwell and anyLogistix and anyLogic, some key points and learnings that we have taken away from our working with these thought leaders over the past several years. And then we're going to jump into the tool and do some demos live here in front of you today. Again, I'm Steve Blatney, the Director of Simulation and Artificial Intelligence for Simwell. I've been in the simulation industry for 10 plus years now. Started in this space with Rockwell Automation, went to Pfizer, and now I'm here with Simwell. Alex, I'll pass the ball to you.
Yes, hi, my name is Alex Franco. I'm the Director of anyLogistix. I've been in supply chain for 20 years. I actually support and train essentially a lot of the Fortune 500 companies, organizations, firms, as I mentioned. My job is to train, and also I do certify here in North America those that are using anyLogistix. So that's essentially my overall background. I do have some telecom background, some other type of background in industry, consulting, retail, and e-commerce.
Hello, Cedro Lignan here, project manager at Simwell. Over 10 years of experience of supply chain. So, let's get started with the webinar.
Alex Isidro, thank you for joining us. All right, so before we get started, I just want to give everybody a little bit of understanding on who Simwell is, so you know who these guys are that are presenting to you today. Again, I mentioned Simwell is the exclusive partner for anyLogistix in all of North America. At Simwell, we are an engineering and solutions company dedicated to simulation, optimization, advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, things of that sort. And what our core group has noticed over the years is that we truly believe that simulation is underutilized in the world. So our mission as a company is to help organizations like yours unlock simulation at scale so that everybody can take advantage of this great technology and help solve greater problems more efficiently, more quickly, and at a better price point than they were able to before. The world is constantly evolving, and it's becoming harder and harder to keep up. And we want to make sure that we can give this opportunity to everybody out there, and that's really what drives our business. We really put our focus on building technologies and processes and bringing in the right people to align to help support your organizations deploy digital twin solutions at scale. So we are going to talk about supply chain today, but we also support simulation, optimization, advanced analytics, and AI across a spectrum of industries and applications, everything from manufacturing to healthcare and anything in between. Our team today is about 68 people, and we have probably 200 plus years of simulation experience across those various industries and applications. We're kind of in a unique place where we're serving a lot of organizations, everything from Fortune 10 companies the whole way down to medium and small-sized businesses. And we have a global reach. Everybody today seems to be working remotely, and we're no different there. We are spread out across Canada, the United States, and across the globe. We serve a variety of different industries. Like I mentioned, supply chain is going to be our focus today, but we do everything from e-commerce to warehouse, manufacturing, We do a lot of work in food and bev. Rail and mining are really strong industries for us. Oil and gas is another sector we play a lot. There's been a lot of growth recently in the electrification, so buses and mines, et cetera, healthcare, defense, and more. Basically, if you could describe your system with words that make sense, we could help your organization to model it and make more data-driven decisions about it. So I talked about initially some of the key learnings that we have gleaned from working with our thought leaders. And right now I'm going to pass the ball over to Isidro so that he could share some of those with you right now. Isidro?
Thank you, Steve. Can you hear my voice now? I'm not muted? All right. Okay, so yeah, we're really grateful that we get to work with some of the more known leaders in supply chain. And these are, we're going to be really brief here. But Steve, if you can show the 4 points that we have here, yeah, you can go on that. So working with the supply chain leaders, we've seen an evolution of how capacity planning was approached in the past. So before, we had the typical supply chain management in which there's a lot of pressure for cost reduction, there's a lot of hierarchy, everyone is in the same building, there is there is a lack of clarity how decisions are made, and there is a reactive approach in which now, especially after the pandemic, we see that now the leaders in supply chain are focusing on value creation, identifying opportunities for the supply chain and for the organization. They are relying in distributed workforce. So a lot of people work from home. They're in different states. They have to coordinate and find ways to collaborate and make it work using their tools, not being constrained in the same building. There is a big emphasis in being more transparent. So now everyone wants to understand how decisions are taken, what are the assumptions behind it, what is the logic. So you need a tool that is supports all the tracking of these decisions. And obviously now these leaders need to be much more proactive. Before we saw disruption as black swans. Right now we see disruption as something that is not if it's going to happen, but when it's going to happen. So the onus are in the supply chain managers now to evaluate and be proactive to know what to do when that happens. All right, so we're going to spend hours talking about this, but let's be brief and move into the webinar. Just to be in the same page, we're going to be talking today about throughput and storage capacity. And a small distinction between the two. When we talk about throughput capacity, we're going to be talking a lot about throughput capacity today's webinar. We're talking about how many units are moved from A to B or from process in a period of time. So imagine that, how many boxes, how many pallets can we move? And when we talk about the storage capacity, we're talking about how many units can be held in a warehouse, for example. So how many boxes, how many pallets can we hold in our system? All right, so now there are many factors that are affecting capacity. I think, Alex, you have a really good view about this, right? Can you tell us a little about it?
Yeah, so a little bit about a lot of the key factors that are affecting capacity. Essentially, everything that is associated with time and volume can be considered as part of your rate or processing in terms of throughput. So identifying the rate or of a process or a logic that's happening within the warehouse or prior to that could help understand your potential throughput. So when it comes to a lot of the time series that are happening or time tests that happen in operations, these are key factors that can be considered. For example, order processing, equipment, labor force, replenishment, processes. Uncertainty also can impact capacity, peak season, fleet size, dock doors, production. So quite an array of key factors, and I'm sure there's quite a few that are probably not listed here, but they all have a direct impact to capacity. So because of the potential impacts, key factors that can impact it, you always have to take in consideration that some of the key factors are not happening as frequently, which are more event-driven. And so how do you deal with those kind of things and make that holistic solutions, stochastic solutions come into play into this? And that's where anyLogistix falls into play. Okay, so let's talk about the types of problems that anyLogistix can solve. So what some of the in capacity planning, for example, what should be designed in your supply chain? What is the risk of storage or capacity constraint? At what time you're going to run out? We can simulate that. What if we introduce new products? What if our workers go on strike, right? The research now starts impacting there. What's the rate if 50% of your labor force is no longer there? What production capacity do we need in this month or at the end of the year or in peak season? What should we rent, purchase, or invest in a new storage location, right? If there's overflow or something. So there's quite an array of questions that always happen in capacity planning. Capacity planning is always considered very strategical, but it also can be considered in different layers of strategy. So this is where we come up with the three layers of strategic and capacity planning, which is strategical, tactical, and operational. So in our pyramid of problems, the level of detail really is the amount of data that we need in order to solve certain problems. So going from analytical, the top of the pyramid, to the bottom of the pyramid, you're going to need more data, more detail. And obviously, each one of these sectors, as you go down the pyramid, goes from strategical decision, where let's just say you're increasing a site or dropping a site from a strategic perspective or moving a site somewhere, right, to a tactical approach is how to implement something, right? Should we rent or purchase that location? So it gets more tactical as you start transitioning between analytical, which is network optimization, or GFA or TEO, transportation optimization, into simulation. And last but not least, at the bottom of the pyramid is operation decisions. The operation level is very important because it can also impact the outside world. And as a brief example, you could take a look at a warehouse with 3 dock doors, right? You could run that model 10 years out to find out that in year 7, right, in the high peak season, that number of dock doors in that layout contribute to a bottleneck, impacting your throughput. So this is kind of how operation level, or even the forklift, right? Number of forklifts or customers can impact. And today we have time, we're going to go into a demo and show you how operations can impact the outside world. So what makes anyLogistix great? I hear this day in and day out when I talk to people, and it's the ability to be agile. And when it comes to decision making, being effective and efficient is very important. And so today we're going to definitely be working with demos. I'm going to be working with Cedru, and we're going to be passing models around, information, and we're going to be solving problems. So our 4 components that we typically focus on that make our anyLogistix great is greenfield analysis, which is looking for locations, right? The number of sites and where. This can be DCs for stocking locations, supplier locations, potential storage, right? Overflow locations, and et cetera. And then we have network optimization. Network optimization is like essentially the most cost-effective or most profitable way to move supply from the suppliers all the way through the supply chain up to the customers. And then we have simulation, which is our growing component. And this component is becoming more serious and more important every day because there's a lot more focus on the customer. And so that customer experience obviously can really be kind of pushed through in KPIs using simulation. Keep in mind, simulation is really the future because a lot of the technology like digital twins is based on simulation. And the difference, just to give a clear indication of the difference between network optimization and simulation, is that with network optimization, you're really getting the best case, while with simulation, you're getting the most likely case. So you're going to be able to see how it's most likely going to perform in time, and you're going to see that performance. And a lot of companies use it for what-if scenarios because in time, what you can see, you can see in a virtual reality world everything that's going to happen instead of seeing in the real world. Because with the digital age, now you can put scenarios and not have to actually do it in the real world, right? And spend that time and that investment, right, and that money. So obviously that simulation helps nowadays. And last but not least, transportation optimization, which is your finding of your milk runs or last mile deliveries, and using your fleet size as best as possible. All right, so now we're going to go into anyLogistix demonstration. We're going to demonstrate a capacity planning strategical and a GFA capacity planning location. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Yeah, so you should guys all be able to see my screen now. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background of what's going on here. So here we have a supply chain in the Northeast, and the storyline here is that we're selling this copy machine in the Northeast. It's quite popular. They've established a headquarters here in Chicago. I'm going to show the connections. And in the Chicagoland area, that one plant can provide only to the Chicago market. Okay. Now, the rest of the DCs in the Northeast are going to provide to respective markets. So they're going to be providers fulfilling the customers in their respective areas. Now, as you see, right now, currently, it's a bit of a mess because it's not optimal yet. It's current state, right? Anybody can provide it to anybody. But the network optimization is going to provide who should fulfill it at who. But just to give a brief view of the structure view, this is what we're really dealing with. We have a supplier providing to a plant who can provide to the market in Chicago or directly to DCs who will respond to their respective markets. So now that we've assessed that and understand a little bit of the storyline, we're going to have to see if there's any throughput issues or potential throughput issues that we could happen. So we're going to run a 5-year view of this network optimization and find out if we have any capacity issues. Now, so this way we can start looking into what we can do. So before we do that, I'm just going to take a look at a few tables so you guys can comprehend what's going on. For example, in the DCs and factories table, we see that we currently have all our DCs in our plant, all it included. So we're going to include as potential current state. We're running this 5 years per month basis. We're going to take a look at our product flows. We're going to make sure that we add our capacity for each DC. So we take a look, we have our 5 DCs, last 5 rows, and we've adjusted with a max throughput of 400,000 units. So this is how much these locations can outbound from a production process rate every month. They can only do 400,000. So we're made it very simple for the 5 DCs just for the demo. But just make sure that you expand your destinations. So this way you understand that globally, sending to these customers, you're maxing out at 400,000 per month. Now, keep in mind, this is the outbound. In particular situations, the inbound can have a different rate, so it can be less or more. So if that's the case for you, you might want to make sure in the previous segment you add that. Now, since our previous segment is coming from a factory, we provide our production rate here, our max throughput. So from the plant to the DC, we have a max throughput of 10 million units. That means the location in Chicago, the plant, can manufacture about 10 million units per month, which is quite a bit. All right, so now that we have an inbound, outbound, and we've assessed the production rate, now we're going to just take a look at our production storage to see where we have limits from a storage perspective. And so if you take a look here, our plant here, which is 100K, means that it has a max stock of 100,000 units. So it's a small storage, right? But because it only provides to the Chicagoland area, it really doesn't require a lot of storage. So we're going to assess a little bit later on if this is enough storage for that area as well. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run this solution right now for current state. We're going to solve it for one solution, make it run for it, and see if there's any essential situations that we can encounter. Perfect. Okay, there we go. It's wrapping up. All right, so we have a profit of 172 million using our current state locations, right? Let's see how that looks like, guys. So take a look at it here. So if you take a look here in the west, you notice that these DCs are kind of like straight. This is kind of what we would like to see. But if you take a look at the east quickly, you can start already visualizing there's something wrong here. You know, if like for these DCs to provide all the way across to other markets, especially where there's already a DC, means that there's something already going on and they're helping satisfy these locations. So obviously here's a lost opportunity, essentially transportation costs that we could potentially save. So the key perspective here is that there's potentially something wrong here and we got to investigate a little bit more in the Philadelphia DC. So let's go ahead. Let's take a look at our demand fulfillment. That's like the first thing. We want to see, did we really fulfill everybody? Let me just take a look real quick. So I could just check that out. Okay. All right. So seems like we were able to fulfill most because our DCs did provide. So that's perfect. We had 100% fulfillment. Now, the one thing is, let's see if we had any constraint limitations. Did we meet any? So let's go ahead. Let's take a look at our shared flow here. So here at our shared flow is how much a max volume we can provide, we can process per month. So let me go ahead and see if we hit a max anywhere. So I'm going to put in our max, and we take a look. We did hit a few. Let me sort the periods. So as we saw in the visual, in the map, we noticed Philadelphia, and it looked like Philadelphia in the first year, we had 2 months, July and August, the 7th to 8th. And then the following year, we had the 19, 20, 21. So it went from 2 to 3 months. Then the following year was 1, 2, 3, 4. So it looks like it's increasing 1 month every single time. So this tells us that pretty much in 5 years, it's going to start, it's going to be overusing it. To take a look already on month 44, essentially the 4th year, Columbus, DC, which is like its neighbor, it reaches also optimal in a specific month. It means that at one point there was so much already happening that it also ran out of capacity here, throughput capacity. So essentially this is looking kind of great pretty soon. We have to do something about this. Okay, so now that we pinpointed the issue, we definitely need something in this area, guys. We need some additional storage so that we can distribute close by. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it to Isidro, who will support in finding a potential new location so we can service close to the customer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export my Excel file. I'm going to provide it here. This way I can share it with Isidro, and I'm going to pass the ball to Isidro.
Okay, so you should be seeing right now, can you see anyLogistix? Yeah,
Yes.
Okay. So let's load the model first. Let's go here. That's something that I really like from anyLogistix, that we can collaborate really easily. Okay, so Alex, this is the model that we need to load, right?
Yes,
Yeah, that's the one that we're just working with. Perfect. Okay, so we have it loaded, up, and done. Right, so now with a couple of clicks, I'm able to build off on what Alex was working, and now we're gonna do a green field analysis. So just with a click here, I'm gonna create a GFA. We don't have to do the transformation ourselves, the system does it. And then we're gonna focus on the East Coast customers. So let's get these ones out of the map right now. This one's okay. And then, okay, so we wanted to focus here, right? So we saw that we had a previous warehouse. Most likely that warehouse was created there in that area because we had a lot of customers there. But as we grow and we add more customers to the area, maybe it could be a good idea to reconsider what will be the best location. Okay, so Alex, are these all the customers you want to consider?
Yes. That's perfect.
Perfect. All right, so let's make a group here to focus on these customers. As with a click here, and then customer Coast group. Like this. So we have 139 customers. Okay, and now just a little click here for setting up the model. We're gonna exclude the DCs that we had before in the NO, and we're gonna be almost ready. Okay, so now we're gonna run this first model, and then we're gonna consider what will be the optimal location for setting. What do you think, Alex? Should we start with one DC?
Yes. Are we considering supplier influence?
I think so. Let's consider what is the influence of the supplier for this one, right? And then we can build a little more on that model. So really quick, we just go here. We just want to do this one in mile. We want to select one site only, and we want to focus on the customer East Coast group, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so everything is good, and we can run it. There you go. So if we are considering the supplier as well, okay, so this will be the optimal location to optimize the transportation from the supplier to the DC and to the DC to the customers. So Alex, it looks like the first one should be in the region of around Easton. Can you see it here?
Yep.
Yeah, got it. Okay, and then as we said before, leaders in supply chain management, now they are adding to create value and open opportunities. So one thing that we can quickly do here is that with this model, we are considering the supplier as well, right? But we can create other option that we're focusing more in what will be the optimal location to go fastest to our customers. So exclude the supplier and just focusing on settings, right? So we can do this really quickly. We just go to the data, and then here in the suppliers, we're not gonna include it now. Exclude it. Our model is ready, and then we just run another one. Okay, so let's see what will that be. Okay, so in this case, we can see how it has changed. So Alex, it looks like we wanted to focus on customers and have the fastest way to get to customers straight away. That will be opening something in the New York area. Got it?
Yeah, got it.
All right, so what do you think if, I mean, we have a problem because we ran out of capacity, so maybe we are not able to find a big DC to hold all this inventory, or maybe we can create 2 DCs and be even, having even higher service levels. What do you think? Should we try to find 2 locations?
I think so, because right now the current location in the east, the DC, Pennsylvania, is in a lease and potentially it's going to run out, so we could also consider 2 new sites, really. So yeah, that would be great.
So let's do it here. Okay, so I'm gonna change this 1 to 2 and then run it again. And here we go. Right. So see, as we have a lot of customers on the New York area, so this warehouse still suggests, the GFA still suggests to have something on this area. But look at this, it would be beneficial to consider another DC that would be around Alexandria. Okay?
Got it.
All right. Okay, good. So I'll pass it to you, and we can evaluate the cost and the advantages of these DCs.
All right, so now that we have a few locations, what I'm going to do is going to create a copy of this one so we can start fresh. And I'm going to rename this with the objective of with GFA locations. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly manually add those locations that were talked about. We talked about one in New York City. Perfect. We talked about another one in Easton, which is right there. It's around that area. And another one in Alexandria, here you go, Virginia. So we're going to put it, I guess, here. There you go. So I've added my 3 sites. Now, one, you could, as you saw, I put it on the map. You could also have imported it to location. Or we could have gone to locations, just add the last longs there, and it'll find the location. So we could have done this several ways. You could actually see, you could probably also send me the sheet, right? And we could also have just import the sheet, and that would have probably been as easy as possible. But there's several options that we could have actually done this at this point. But now what we're going to do is I'm going to change the color of these 3 so everybody can manage visually that these are the new sites, the GFA sites. And I'm going to make sure I put names to them. So New York City, DC. This one's going to be Easton, DC. And the last one is Alexandria, DC. There we have it. So now we have all the DCs ready to go. Now we've color coordinated them. Now let's make sure we set them all to consider, right? Because we want the reason why we're setting these to consider, which is very important to understand, is that we want the model to recommend to us these 4, consider which one's the one. Because if I was to include all these, then obviously it would include all 4 of them. So considering is letting the engine know the rule of the business rule that we only want what's best. You let us know of all the ones that are considered in the East what's best. in terms of profit, because this model is set to give us the most profitable supply chain framework for this scenario. Okay. So now that I've set up this, and now I got to make sure I set up my groups. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead to groups, and the first thing is that yes, I've added new DCs, so I'm going to make sure I add it to my general DCs. But then I'm going to add one the East group DCs. So I'm going to name that East DC group. East DCs. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a sec. I'm going to add these three, and there you have it. All my three on the East DC. And don't forget Philadelphia, right? They're also as part of that group. Okay. So now that we've added all the new DCs to the general and into the group, we're going to go ahead and make sure they're in our product flow lines. So we're going to go here because we got to put a capacity constraint on them as well, a throughput constraint. So we're going to add those three. Yeah, here's Alexandria, here's Easton, and here is New York City. Yep, there you go. Just gotta make sure we got our customers, United States customers, vehicle type, perfect. And let's just make sure we put the same amount of capacity for right now, just to run the model, and we're all set here. Now, the one thing is when we run the model though, we don't want, imagine that maybe the optimal is 3 sites. Maybe we only have a budget for 2. So let's find only, let's make sure we set up an asset constraint, which is another rule. So let me go ahead and do that. And I'm going to suggest that in the East DC group, these 4 DCs, we only want 1 to 2 sites. Obviously, we definitely need 2, but let's just say we don't have the budget to add a 3rd one. So we got to only be precise, and we want only 2 to be selected. Tell us which are the 2 optimal ones. And at that point, with this in turn, now we can just check the structure view. It means everything's designed specifically perfect. So I'm going to see if there's any issues, any errors. There's none. Now we can run our experiment. And we're running for 1 solution. So now what's going to do now, it's going to download all the potential routes because we're actually using routes here. We're actually using the actual routes and the cost associated with these routes per mile. Okay. So while it runs, I do want to make you guys all aware that we could have suggested more than 1 best solution. We could suggest, hey, give us the 3 best frameworks, right? Supply chain frameworks, not just 1. So this way we have different options. We could look at the 2nd best, the 3rd best, because we never know if the first one, even though it might be profitable, the second one maybe is maybe the second most profitable, but it has a high service level or a better service level than the first one. So not necessarily always the first one is the most aligned to the company's objectives.
So now, Alex, what if we want to add more DCs? If we marketing or finance or someone in the executive level comes and say, hey, why don't you evaluate a DC in this area? Will it be easy to add it?
It's as easy as I just drop them, like how we did. We could add more. If let's say, hey, our GFA came up with 3, and the marketing, our department say, hey, we have 4 locations that we could consider out there that we have already a partnership with. Let's just add those 4 and just consider them as well while we're at it. Yeah, just run those 4 and set up as consider and just run it. Yep. And just to kind of based on that topic, the same thing, right? Let's just say one of the sites is in the border of the state, right? And just a state over like 10 miles, we could put another location to show that it's less in taxes, property taxes, and how it could impact the overall model. So we could really run a lot of options and based off the rentals, we could add all the potential rentals in the area and say, hey, here are the contracts. Let's run those models and consider, hey, which is the best potential opportunity to use. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's quite a few ways that it can be used.
Yeah, no, I really like the agility that anyLogistix provides, and as well how easy will be this to explain them, to our organizations, right? We can go back to the tables and explain clearly what will the limits and everything that we've done to come to this conclusion.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, at that point, we could definitely run a simulation, right, to show how well it's going to perform, and then we can do a lot of comparisons there. So, but we got the solution. So let's take a look at what we had. Right. So we have a profit of 185 million, right, and the two suggested locations. Yep, these are the winners. All right. So the winners are, we kind of make it simple, is Alexandria and New York City. Based on the cost perspective, right? Obviously, we could add more detail, like, you know, tax properties to get more detail. Maybe that could change a bit. But for just based on what we have, these are the two optimal locations that we can deal with. There you go. And if you notice, look at this. Beautiful. And this is what we want to see. This is optimal in terms of like, hey, we're using the best we can. And this makes sense that these DCs are going further east because guess what? It's coming from the plant. And sometimes it just makes sense because the break even is going to be further east than the usual. So this is nice. This is a nice, you can tell this is how it should be looking like. Okay. All right. So let's kind of make sure that it did fulfill everything though. So let's just do a quick check. Demand, right? I'm just going to sort it. Everything's 100%, so we're all good there. Let's just take a look at shared flow constraints. And let's see if anything was maxed out. So I'm going to go ahead and see if anything was at, you know, 400,000. And yeah, it was still New York City. So we did still hit a max, but our profit grew quite a bit, right? To take a look. So this is definitely an improvement financially. But this tells me something. And maybe if we're going to go to New York City, 400,000 might not be what we're looking for. Maybe that throughput should be a bit higher. So maybe our layout should be a little bit bigger. So this is something that already tells us already, hey, you know what? We should be looking for a location that can produce 600,000 throughput or 700,000 throughput. But we know at this point still in New York City for that throughput is not enough. But because we added another site in the east, it balanced it out and it's still being very profitable. And we went from like 172 to 185, $13 million improvement. There you go. And that 13 million is based on 5 years run. So in 5 years, the profit would be $13 million. All right. So let me go, let's go ahead and let's go back to our PowerPoint slide.
So the problem that Alex just, I don't know if you can you see my screen now?
I'm seeing your PowerPoint. Yeah.
All right. Okay, perfect. So the problem that Alex just solved was related to overflow, right? So we consider overflow when we have an excess of volume over our capacity. So here represented really schematically with the dotted line, that will be our capacity, and the orange line will be how our capacity is evolving. So one usual scenario that now leaders are solving is being proactive, and if you are here in year 2022, evaluating when are we reaching that capacity in 2025 and what steps will lead us to avoid running out of capacity. So managing this overflow. And that's something that is, is relatively easy for the business to understand. Another one that is a little more challenging sometimes to understand is when the overflow is seasonal. That will be represented with this graph here on the right. And that's when we only have overflow for certain weeks or months because it's seasonal. We have a peak of volumes, and then we're not sure how can we cover that capacity. Right, so now we're going to see an example in which we are suffering this seasonal overflow, and how can we deal with this tactical decision. We know where our warehouse needs to be or our DC needs to be, but now we need to decide what kind of DC or what kind of facility we need. Okay, Alex, so I'll pass it to you. Let me make you a presenter here.
Okay. So we're going to do now an actual demonstration on the tactical side of capacity planning. Should we rent, purchase, or build? So this is kind of coming from the bigger model that we just did. This is now the Chicagoland market. We still have our headquarters here with a plant, but now let's take a look at what potentially is our current scenario. So we're going to run this for 5 years. We're going to understand what situation we're encountering. We still do have that 100,000 capacity storage. We want to make sure we do have enough storage for the Chicagoland area as well. So what we're going to do here, we're going to make sure I exclude my asset constraints first. Exclude that out. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of take a look at our storage. We do have 100K there. I'm certain of that. So let me go ahead and set now our DCs and factories and make sure that I only include the current state and exclude everything else. Now, keep in mind what we're actually doing here when running this model, we want to understand first current state, and then, but what we want to do is, well, what if we were to run out of space or something? So let's run this model to see what happens, okay? Now, so let me go ahead and run one solution here. Yep. There we go, initially open, run it. So first of all, our current state shows that we have a $187 million profit. This is current state with original plan. This is great. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to consider, just take a look at what happens here with our current state. Do we have enough? So let's take a look at our demand and take a look at this. There's quite a lot of demand we're not fulfilling. So there's something going on. So it could be throughput, it could be capacity. Let's take a look at storage because I know it's small and maybe this is the problem. So let's see if we can pinpoint that real quickly. Let's look at shared storage constraints. And let's take a look at if we reached a max at one point. There you go. Yep. So this proves that we did run out of space in certain months, probably most likely the peak month of every year. So starting with the second year. So obviously it's been progressing and getting worse. So I'm assuming we've been, at last year we probably lost the most opportunity to sell these products. Okay. So what can we do here, guys, right? So this is something we can do. So what can we do? So we have a few things. We could expand the current site and invest in it to expand more and build more storage. Maybe go from 100 to 250,000 units. So obviously that would require an investment. And for this particular demo, it's like maybe an investment. Let's put it would be $1 million to invest in that. So would it be a good opportunity to invest in an expansion and have that and just kind of build on the plant, or can we maybe go and rent since it's overflow? It's really just overflow, pieces. So maybe we could put this in a location nearby as overflow because as you notice, it was just 1 month. Maybe the expansion is not worth it. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask ALX, hey, consider all these options. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to my data, go to my Ds and factories. Now I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and include an expansion plant. So I'm going to consider that. I'm also going to consider, hey, staying with the 100K plant. Just consider that storage size. But I'm also going to consider an overflow rent location, which is like right next to it right here. So obviously we have rental, we have rent, and we also pay per storage there. So per cubic meter, I'm sure there's a price, probably a little bit more costlier than our own location, but it's there for potential overflow. So let's find out what's best. Should we rent or should we invest in expanding our location? So we're going to run this model now. And before we do, we're going to make sure that we let the engine know that we only want one plant, so it doesn't select both, right? Because maybe it is maybe it's a good investment, but most likely it's not. But I'm just going to make sure that we have only one plant that we decide, the 100 or the 250. So I'm going to run that experiment now. There you go. And there you go. Here's our future state. And let's see. And so it selected our 100K cap and our rent storage. This was the most profitable decision to do in a 5-year span. Better than the investment of the expansion of the location. So this suggests not to invest, but to essentially, rent. Okay. So this is a great opportunity for us to understand, should we tactically invest, rent, or potentially purchase a new location. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and customer, okay. So I'm going to share it now back to Steve. Steve, if you could point us up to customer experience role. Okay, so just to kind of go a little bit about today's capacity planning. This is kind of top off what's happening today that everybody should be aware. This is very important. You're going to notice that a lot of today's capacity planning, there's a lot of digital twin and digital supply chain strategy. These are a little distinct. A digital twin is understanding how everything's performing. It's automating the data. It's giving you some performance. It's giving you something knowledgeable, something to learn, something to understand, and something to execute on. But with digital supply chain strategy, it's more focused on this actually capacity planning, essentially. Because strategically speaking, you could build this tactical and strategical component in your own supply chain excellence group. So companies are really doing is they're bringing this potential competency in capability in their supply chain. So this is kind of essentially what's happening. A lot of companies now are actually bringing in this as a capability, are learning this, are using this. And they're validating their own performance and validating their own strategy. All right. And the second biggest thing is that people or at least a lot of companies, they're restructuring their supply chain. They're making this from a vital perspective, they're making this so they can learn a lot and make best use of their current state. Okay, so as we noticed, like another DC came in and supported another location, right? So it made best use and optimal use of what should be happening based on what was currently happening. And so that requires a prescribed solution every so often. If it was a disruption that triggered that, updates, or if it's an event or it's a weekly perspective or a daily perspective, what companies are doing, they're doing periodical changes or checks for the opportunities to see if they can balance something that's optimal, lean, and just in case. And this is where we get into being resilient as a supply chain, because you're adopting these changes immediately into the supply chain. So restructuring is becoming a very important part of supply chain. And last but not least, the customer experience, guys. This is where everybody's going. Everybody has a brand, is looking to optimize. And that's the reason why, in order to do branding and service level, it requires simulation. And simulation is an ever-growing component. It's becoming more important. And if you want to address and prioritize your customer, this is the path to go.
Thank you, Alex. So kind of bring everything together here is, how can you get started doing this today? How can you get started, helping your organization improve their supply chain and capacity planning? A great place to get started is, if you're interested and maybe you still have some more questions, to reach out to either myself, Alex, or Isidro. We're happy to schedule some time with you to discuss how we can support you moving forward and fill you in on anything that you might be unsure about. Next good point to start is, to join one of our public training courses. We have one coming up in June, or we could schedule customized private virtual courses with you and your organization and deliver those on demand. If you're feeling really excited and you want to just get going right away, you can go to the anyLogistix website, anyLogistix.com, and download the Professional Learning Edition, the free trial of anyLogistix. Start playing around with it on your own. And again, from the Simwell perspective, we have the ability to do everything. Being a partner of anyLogistix for North America, we can deliver you the licenses, or we can do full turnkey consulting, or anything in between. So whether that means coaching to help your team and your organization get started building your first models, the training that we talked about, or any kind of support that you might need, we're here to help your organization with that. So please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Alex, or Isidro, and we can help you in any way that makes sense for you. Quickly want to touch on the AnyLogic company. And again, thank you to them for the opportunity to present today, for being such a great partner to us. AnyLogic company has been around for a long time. They're years ahead of all the other simulation tools out there on the market with their flagship tool, anyLogic and anyLogistix. They are the leader in supply chain modeling. They have exceptional technical support and do a great job in progressing their tools to make them the best on the market year over year. So thank you to them. If you have any questions or want to check them out, you can go to their websites and learn more there. Thank you again to everybody for making time to join us today. I hope everyone got something out of this opportunity for this webinar. Thank you to Alex Isidro for your work in this presentation. If anyone has any questions at all, please use the chat at this time and we can try to address those. Like I said, if there's anything we don't get to, we'll make sure to follow up with you afterwards. And just again, as a reminder, this presentation and the recording will be made available, as well as the slide deck and the files and supporting information that we've covered today, and that will be sent out to all the attendees in the coming weeks. Let's see, do we have any questions here in the chat we could address right now?
Yeah, so Gleb is asking, how will you model the case when warehousing rates are significantly different between the potential sites? So there is option to put your costs in the model. So you can model, as Alex said, you can model anything that you want. You can have variable costs, you can have other costs, you can add the tax cost. So the anyLogistix tool will accommodate whatever cost you need to model. So Gleb as well is asking, how would you model storage capacity requirements and how they are linked to the DC fixed cost?
Yeah, okay. Great question. So the requirements really, yeah, great question, because obviously when you want to get all these requirements, there's a lot of key factors, right, to get throughput, right? It's not necessarily always straightforward. Not all the time is the company gathering that data. Okay, so when the company's not gathering data, you got to do your time studies, and you got to go there and do these time studies yourself. So obviously, like, it can really depend on the situation that's happening in that company. So if they're gathering your data, it's going to be easy, right? But keep in mind, there's so many pieces, right? Like unloading, loading times, processing times, order times, right? So these like all potentially can impact the throughput of an order all the way to like the processing, all the way to outbound. So really, it really requires some time study to really understand your throughput. But it could be as easily just going to say, hey, how much did we do at the peak, right? When we had like full resources of 100%. So if you're able to find out like your max throughput and the peak of that month, you can already figure out, hey, this is my max. So what's my average per month, right? And then you can get your average most likely per month. So you can, with these two types of capacities, like your most likely and your max, you can really start understanding what you could potentially do in a particular location, DC that is. Great question.
All right. So we don't have more time for more questions, I think, but maybe we can reach out to the people that had other questions, right?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Do that. And our contact information is available here. If you have any questions more, you want to follow up later individually, please do. And again, thank you, everyone. Alex Isidro, appreciate your help. And thank you all for being here. Take care, everyone.